Oh
No,
my
that's
God, there's
just
Santa Claus.
yeah. That's not Santa Claus. That's Robin.
Are you sure that's not Santa Claus? And he is ducking.
Derek says you look like Santa Claus.
Thanks, Derek.
Tell him to stand up and show the people. The people are
Biggest
always
gift they
asking
ever
about
gave
it.
you is sitting in front of you staring at a computer screen.
Biggest gift or biggest detriment?
He can't hear you. I have headphones on.
Oh, tell him that I think you're a liability.
He thinks you're a liability, not me.
I won't hold you down.
He's not
You're a
trying to
big
stay
man.
out of. He's not trying to stay out of frame. He's just.
It looks like Santa Claus.
Yeah, he says you look like Santa Claus.
Yeah.
How cold is it in the house?
It's freezing in our house. I told you. That was the first thing I said when I went on. It's freezing. That's why we're both wearing toques.
All right, let's talk about how to talk to agents, how to talk to scouts when you get into your OHL minor midget draft year, or you're talking to college recruiters. There's going to be a lot of guys that come at once, and if you screw up that first impression, that's like an uphill battle now to get over that. So for the guys that are listening that are going into those important years where they're going to have that first contact with scouts or agents or coaches or recruiters, just kind of talk about some of the things that you thought about or you kind of instilled, making sure that you were ready to have a good conversation and leave a good first impression.
Yeah, this is a great topic. It's a little different than speaking to the media. It's speaking to reporters. So it's unique in that aspect. And I definitely, when I was in minor midget, when I spoke to scouts and coaches, I needed help initially. So I was fortunate to have good resources. But the three important takeaways I'd have is confidence. Speak with confidence, have confidence in yourself, have confidence in your ability to speak, because that will carry over into making you sound, well, more professional and more mature than you might not actually be. The second would be practice. So with your parents or with teacher or with your goalie coach or someone, have them ask you questions and you could practice your responses, you could practice your public speaking, and you could build that confidence, which is step number two. And the third thing is you have to know what to say to kind of sell yourself. And that's going to come with asking the people in your corner what they would like to hear in their situations. And so understanding kind of what phrases and what things to say that are going to make you stand out from other goalies or players that are being evaluated. When it comes to an evaluation interview or an interview through a coach or a scout, that is when you have to be able to sell yourself as who you are, because when you're going to get drafted or signed by a team, they're not only citing your abilities on the ice, but who you are as a person, and you want to be able to show that and market that.
One thing I will say is, and this is what I kind of instruct my goalies to say, and when you kind of talked about tell them what they want to hear, this is also part of that, but it's also true, is sell your desire to win.
Yeah.
So if it's an OHL coach or OHL coach or recruiter or scout that is coming to talk to you, talk about how you want to help their team win, how you want to win a Memorial Cup, because although you might be saying to them what they want to hear, it's also true. Mm-hmm. There's no kid out there that's going through the OHL draft that if you play in the OHL doesn't want to win a Memorial Cup. So talk to them about that and talk about how you want to be part of a winning culture and you want to help a team get over the hump and win, because winning is what every one of these guys is looking to do, because that's their job. Scouts are looking to draft guys that will win. Coaches are looking to coach guys that will win. And same at the NCAA level. If you want to win a national championship, winning a national championship is going to help you move on to the next level. So make sure you're conveying that your desire to succeed and contribute to a winning culture is going to help them have success, help you have success, help the program have success. And then in the future, it's going to help them recruit new guys to continue that winning culture.
Oh, you're exactly right. And I remember way back in 2009 when I was drafted to the OHL, what you just said right there got me drafted to the Sarnia Sting. So we can use this little anecdote as a prime example. I had spoken to maybe 20 teams, and you had told me the next team that calls you, tell them you want to win a Memorial Cup with Team X. And the last team that called me, and they didn't even have a ton of interest, was Sarnia. And I went through my interview and I ended, thank you very much. I just want to say I really want to be a part of the Sarnia Sting. I want to win a Memorial Cup with Sarnia. And that was it. I thought, well, they didn't really show any interest throughout the season, blah, 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 blah. Fast forward to the draft, the pick before, I guess, Brampton Battalion at that time. Brampton really liked me, and they had said they were going to take me in the round 3 to 5. And the pick before Brampton's in the 4th round was Sarnia Sting. Sarnia picked me, and they had said a big reason for that was my willingness, I guess my desire to win, and the fact that I was able to talk about that to the scouts. And just that one line single-handedly got me drafted to the OHL, and that's what people want to hear, because I mean, you want to win. Everyone wants to win. Hockey is about winning. That's really what, at the end of the day, it's about winning and moving on to the next level. You need to win.
When coaches develop players to the next level and coaches win, they get promoted and they get to move up a level. And the goal for every coach that's in the OHL, I would say, is to coach in the National Hockey League one day. And they also have to work their way up through the ladder, just like we do as coaches and as players and as goalies. You gotta work and have success at each level to move up to the next level. And they want to surround themselves with guys that are going to help them succeed and move up that ladder. And they're going to surround themselves with guys that want to have success and will put in the work ethic. And if you go back to our chat with Frankie Palazzi, he's the goalie coach for Sarnia, and we talked a little bit about the draft, is when it came down to two goalies that were very similar in skill set and very similar in kind of ability to play the game, he said, it's character. I'm going to go after the guy, and I'm going to draft the guy that shows the most character. And winning and the desire to win is a huge character trait in sports, and people want to be surrounded by winners. And everyone's heard the term winners win, but it's true, guys. And winners win, and winning is a habit, and we talk about that all the time. So when you are talking to scouts or agents or coaches or recruiters, make sure you're conveying your desire to win.
Yeah, I honestly think the winners win is a whole other banter, or even a podcast episode on its own, because then we can get into things like, the Michael Jordan mindset, which we're all seeing when we watch The Last Dance. But it's really important for young kids to know that you need public speaking and speaking interview is something you practice. Very few people just wake up one day and boom, are able to enunciate and articulate all the words that they want. You need to do whatever you can to stand out. So if you're on the phone with a scout and you're talking very professional with confidence, you're not using those filler things like, yeah, you sound really good compared to another kid who's like, well, I don't know. I guess like I really want to play in the OHL because, and they're sweating and the phone is shaking in their hands. That's a big thing, because it shows that maturity. And when you're 16 years old, like most of us we're very immature at that age, and you could set yourself apart by just getting those man hours in and practice. And a last thing is, like, as you could probably tell, Booge, especially with the technology and the social media and the phones and the texting, social skills are on the decline for most kids. Kids don't look at you in the eye. They don't shake your hand with a firm grip. All these things that are kind of starting to fall by the wayside, these are things that you need to practice and you need to be aware of when you have your interviews. And so that's why it's great to speak to your goalie coaches, speak to your head coach, assistant coaches, so that you know what it is to look for and to practice.
There's a good YouTube channel on, sorry, not a good YouTube channel. There's a good YouTube video. It's on the Spit and Chicklets channel, and they are interviewing Brian Burke, and Brian Burke is talking about a lot of his draft day interviews, and he talks about one with Nail Yakupov and Morgan Riley. So anybody who's listening to this, no free ads for Spit and Chicklets. I don't think they need the promotion from us and our tiny little podcast. But there's a pretty good video that I saw last week that just kind of a perfect example of Brian Burke, a guy who's straightforward, no nonsense, loves his truculence. He talks about just some of the interviews that he's done through his kind of career as a GM. So go take a look at that, watch that, and you guys are going to kind of get a kind of look behind the curtain on what his thoughts were on some of these guys who are now NHL stars and how their drafts interviews went. Put in 6 minutes and watch it and let us know what you think in the comments on this, because we need to get our comments up. Our comment level is low.
Yeah, we need a little more interaction.
Probably, Jamie, what 2009 and 10, I got into the business, and I think you were drafted by Sarnia, was that correct?
Yeah.
Remember? Yeah, because I remember seeing you in camp. I think I spoke to you years ago when I first got into the business, because you're Caledonia or Cuga way, right?
Yeah, Caledonia.
Yeah, so
that is impressive.
That is impressive.
So, yeah, I remember I followed you all. Yeah, no, I remember following you all the way up, and I remember watching you through college and stuff. So yeah, familiar with you for sure.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah.
So you're in Woodstock now, right?
I'm in Woodstock. Yeah, I've been here since 2004.
Right on. And so for those of you guys that don't know, Kris is a partner with Gladiator Hockey Agency. So you've been doing that. How long have you been doing that for?
Well, as I said, first year that I got into it, and to be honest with you, I got out of the game of hockey after I retired from playing in Europe. And about 2004 or 5, I coached some junior C and junior B, and it just wasn't for me. We were successful, but it wasn't for me, that avenue. It was, I wanted to do something a little more helpful or involved with player or their future or education or guidance. So I started on my own in 2009. And then that's, I think, probably when I saw Jamie. Another one I spoke to was actually, they used to have the under 17 camp here in Woodstock. It was different than the OHL Gold Cup that they have. I remember that year I also spoke to Brandon Montour's father. He was undrafted, and a lot of players were standing out, and he wasn't, because he wasn't this big, tall, statured player. So he was smaller but smart. And I remember talking to his dad, and I lost touch with him. But I started around 2009 getting into that business, and then I went to Mike MacArthur, who, as I said, was involved with a lot of the Norfolk County players. He had the agency called the MacArthur Group at the time that kind of changed to the Hockey Group. The MacArthur Group, they laughed at. They said it was more like a trucking company with the name. So they changed it to the Hockey Group. And that was, they've been in business since 1997. So I spent a better part of 5, 6 to 7 years just kind of helping players or giving advice. Minor midget into junior, OHL. Kind of took over a lot of their major junior prospects as far as for looking after the contracts. So I've been in it now. It's about 10 years that I've been involved in this side of the business.
So you brought up minor midget, which is that's the first year that players start getting your attention. So for you guys at Gladiator, and you guys are watching minor midget, what is first contact? Is that early in the year? Is it later in the year? And what type of players are you guys looking for when you guys are out kind of scanning minor midget?
Well, I'm sure Jamie will know and you'll know. Unfortunately, last year we made the decision, for 10 years that I've been in it, we only really talk to players in minor midget. The sad part is a lot of these families are having agents by major bantam. To me, it's, I don't really like it because I think they're kids. I even still think in minor midget that they need to focus on being kids and having fun. But yes, minor midget age is where we used to do it. We now, like I said, we now have 05s and 06s signed, 2006 date of birth kids. So it's the only way that we can kind of be, I guess, there on the scene like the other agencies, the larger agencies. At that point in age, before the season starts, is when we usually get those kids, and it's mainly an icebreaker. When you're working with an agency, like I always tell them, whether you work with us or somebody else, is make sure that you're with somebody that shares the same values as the family. Make sure it's somebody that you can trust, that whether your son is or isn't going to make the NHL, will still be there for your son and the family, whether it's the East Coast, whether it's the Oberliga, whether it's college, and then they're done. You want to make sure that somebody is actually there for the right reasons and the long haul, because most players will know it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? Hockey, our job, the way we look at it is to prolong a player's career as long as possible, right? So help with their development. But yes, it starts very early in the season. Just more with the stress and anxiety of that minor midget year is very stressful for kids. Colleges are starting to recruit, believe it or not, and the OHL is there, and then you also have the junior teams looking to sign these kids as 16-year-olds, and the pressure with what everybody else is doing, right? It's almost like the keeping up with the Joneses, right? Some people want to have the attention of having an agent standing with them in a tournament like the Marlies tournament, and we kind of keep it a little private, where we want the focus to be on the kid having fun and focus being development. And the only way that I think a player can develop is they don't have the stress and the pressure, and they have a support group, and they have some privacy. So yeah, it starts pretty young.
So it sounds like you wanted to be in control of how much integrity you had in what you're doing.
Yeah, integrity is everything to me. I'm not perfect. None of our guys at the agency are perfect, but integrity goes a long way. And the hockey world is a very small world. Prime examples are a third party telling a client of ours, whether it's a family member, about this school, or you call a coach at that school. Next thing you know, the coach is like, yeah, I know the coach of that junior B team, and yeah, we were talking to that kid. And then the parent goes, wow, you do know. And I'm like, yeah, I'm telling you, the hockey world is a very small world. There's times you reach out to somebody in Russia or wherever, and it's about someone most people wouldn't even know about as a player, but we're all connected because we communicate. And when you're in the business 20 years, it's picking up the phone and making a phone call, right? So the integrity of not screwing over a program when you commit a player to it. I mean, I just went through that last week with Junior A and Junior B with a 17-year-old who's drafted in the O and has NCAA eligibility and teams after him. There was a commitment, and he committed to one club, and another club in another league was, you didn't sign anything yet. You didn't sign anything, right? But made the verbal commitment. And we felt the commitment that we made was the best thing for the player's interest as a family. And the family had to tell that other team is that, yeah, nothing's on paper, but we are about being ethical, and we made a commitment and a promise to this program, and we're going to honor it. So, that's part of how we select our players too, right? I mean, there's players that we've turned away that, you get them, and then you find out after that this isn't the way we gel. We do not like working this way. We want to make sure that we're working with good people, so that when we pick up the phone, we call a college, or we call an OHL team, or we call a minor pro team, or even AHL or NHL camps, that you're having a character kid come to that camp, right?
Yeah, that's important to understand.
Yeah.
Philly, you're always cutting me off.
I have a question.
All right, go. I always let you go first.
What's up, Jamie?
At what age and what circumstances do you suggest a player either look for an agent or start to talk to agents or as an agent, when do you start to look for guys?
Again, every situation is different. We typically go, like I said, now recently this past year, after 10 years of being in it, I made this suggestion that we look at kids in their minor Bantam, just to follow them into major Bantam, and start to break the ice in major Bantam on our behalf to see if, we think there's potential. And again, the way we operate is we don't go gold mining thinking this is an NHL player. We look at it as, this is a young man that has potential, and potential to me could mean, like Jamie, you're familiar, an NCAA route that's going to get education out of it, or even, if they're going to be good, they're going to go to the OHL and get an education package. That's where we start, right? We don't tag those players as NHL prospects at 14 because we don't have a crystal ball, and we know everybody develops differently. So for us, we start to look at them minor Bantam. We might break the ice in major Bantam just to say hello. Again, we're not a very pressure orientated agency, and we basically just break the ice and let them know we're around, what we're about, how we are, how many guys we have with us working for us. But other agencies or other kids, sorry, when the families are 13, 14 and a kid is excelling, and they're going to start to get approached by a lot of kids like GTHL. You get a stud in there like Connor McDavid, some of these players that you see, Robbie Fabry over the years. You go in and you know the big names, right? Those kids are having agents at 12, 13 years old. Sean Day with another one. It's different because they feel forced, they feel compelled that they have to, I think, because everybody's knocking on the doors. The strong-willed ones will hold off, the parents, meaning, and I praise the strong-willed parents because they're doing what's best for their son. Meaning, right now it's probably not the best thing because they're 12 or 13 and they're holding off. And I find that some parents are actually will respect you more if you're around for answering questions, and it's not about pressure. Meaning, we've had times where everybody's after a player at 12 or 13. We've introduced ourselves at minor Bantam going into major Bantam, and we haven't talked to them through the summer. They might have been approaching the minor midget year, and then they call us and they say, hey, you remember us? Well, sure we do. And then that's where we kind of will go from there. But do I suggest that anybody? I would never suggest that anybody has to have an agent under minor midget. It is good to have somebody with you once you start getting the interest from OHL and NCAA, right? Because I'm surprised a lot of parents are not more up to date. They know everything about the OHL, but when it comes to core courses, when it comes to the NCAA guidelines, when it comes to SATs, I'm really shocked at how many don't know. Like, didn't know what they needed, didn't know what was required. And it's not like it's needed right away at that young of age, but it's great because you can prepare them so that by grade 10 and 11, they're not taking all the arts, they're not taking all the recreational running classes, right? Like you're getting them prepared so that should they walk from that OHL route, they have this thing all lined up, ready to go, right? So
that's a great segue into the difference between, because this is the majority of a goalie podcast. So the majority of goalies are not going to get drafted in the OHL draft or the CHL draft. So their focus now needs to kind of switch gears and think NCAA, which is a longer process, which for anybody who listens to this knows that that's where I'm in favor of big time. And Jamie's gone the NCAA route. And you can see more and more NHL teams are getting more and more interest in signing guys out of the NCAA program. So can you explain to the players listening and their parents the difference between the CHL route and the NCAA, and why a kid can't play in the CHL and then transition and play Division I hockey? Because there's definitely rules on why.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost is, as soon as you're, there's a lot of, again, we go back to that question of when they should have somebody working for them. And minor midget definitely going into that camp after you're drafted is a huge thing because, the first is that 48-hour rule. And there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion with the 48-hour rule. The 48-hour rule is, and it's the same with guys that are in college that go to an NHL camp type deal. The 48-hour rule, up until that point, you come to camp. They normally typically cut most 16-year-olds by that time anyways to send them back. But if you're hanging around and they're planning on signing you, after 48 hours, you've got to pay your own way. You can stay there as long as you want. You've got to do your own hotel, pay for your own meals, keep your receipts. You can do that. But the minute you jump into a preseason game in the OHL and you're rostered on there, you're considered ineligible for the NCAA. Now, at 16, you can protest it with the NCAA. You can say that you didn't have the proper guidance. You can say that, I didn't have anybody working with me, but we picked up a family advisor after, and my son played the 1 or 2 preseason games. Now, they have changed things over the years, but, at one point it was like, you would be sitting out a full season plus the 1 game, right? So you can find your way around that, but it doesn't always work. So the best thing is to be protected in general. You don't step, like with us, you don't step in the OHL unless you have a contract. and you want to make sure that the player is protected. Now, like I said, we've had phone calls with players who have played regular season games in the OHL at 16 or 17, or mainly 17 is the normal typical situation. They play 2 or 3 games, and they're looking for help. They're looking for, this is after they played, and so they wreck their NCAA eligibility. We asked if they had a agreement, education package, and an OHL contract. They did not, because you don't need to have. You don't have to sign a player on a contract to play in the OHL. It's there's a certain game allowance in there where I believe it's 6. I'd have to double check, but if you only play 2 or 3, they do not have to give you a contract. And so we had to go back to the league. We had to go back to the team. I won't mention the GM or the team involved, but we had to go back, and we ended up getting it for the kid, even though the kid wasn't our client when he did it. It's just it's the right thing to do. But yes, that whole thing, as soon as you play in the NCAA, or as soon as you play in the OHL, a preseason game, you're on a roster, you're technically done. Your eligibility is out the window. So the other thing to keep in mind, you were talking about the process of your goalies and the path, right? The path. When you get to about 18 years of age and you're a goalie, whether you've been drafted in the OHL or not, because when I say not, and Jamie might know, you might know as well, is that you get approached. You get approached by QMJHL teams as a free agent. You get approached by OHL teams. You really have to look at what's best for the player, and that could be 18 years old. And what are we looking at here? We're looking at this season and next season's guaranteed, because an overage year is not in the contract for the OHL. It's deleted from a clause out of the contract. So you have to show up to camp as an overager and earn that overage year. So right now what you're looking at is, okay, so technically my client or the family has 2 years of eligibility in the OHL at 18, 2 years. Are we going to get the standard contract presented to us? Or are we going to get a year of education for playing up to this certain date, and the rest of that year is after that date? Or are they going to give us 1 game or 1 year of education for 1 game played? So now we're talking a situation where the goalie could sign and get 1 year of education for 1 game played. So he's in, he gets his year, but the goalie doesn't play much, or the goalie doesn't live up to expectations, and then the following season he's done in the O. So here we are with a 19-year-old now who's got 2 years of junior eligibility left, 1 year of education from the OHL, has X amount of months to use that money, which the old trick was, by the time they were done playing their junior career, if they didn't go to university, the money was void from the OHL, because the time had elapsed for that education package. And then sometimes players were left with nothing. So we had to consider if it's really worth it at 18 to jeopardize the NCAA, because now at 18, and I mean, Jamie and yourself, Derek, too, you'll know that a majority of kids getting these D1 offers are usually 19 and 20, because you know what you're getting, or you know what you're close to getting. At 15, when you make that commitment, you don't know what you're getting. I mean, you're banking on what you're getting, but you don't. So that 18-year-old, when he has that contract for the OHL or the Q in front of him, you've got to make sure that, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do 2 years education for 1 game played, right? Like that the minimum sacrifices that we know we may not be in this league as a 19-year-old, but we're going to steal that year of education as a 19-year-old and bank it. If not, don't even think about it. Pursue junior A and develop out as long as you can, and prolong your career. Go to college at 20, and then you're still playing at 24. You walk into the East Coast, you walk into the A, you walk into Europe, and then at least you're playing, you've got your education, and you're making some money, and you're probably playing till you're maybe 30 at least. Whereas you went to the other route and you pooched your education, and you have nothing really to fall back on. Most guys are done by 21, 22. And that's unfortunate, because it's one decision of, do I really need to tell my peers that I played in the major junior just for a couple games as an 18-year-old? I mean, this is where we think not about tomorrow. We think about 7 years from now. Is my guy still calling me in Europe or in the AHL or East Coast as a 28, 29-year-old? Not a star by no means, but he's living the dream that he wanted, which was to prolong the hockey career, play at a pro level, do well. And like I said, that can all be affected at the age of 17 or 18.
Yeah, and the decisions that we have to make as 15-year-olds that kind of set up the rest of our path in our career. And if you don't have guidance at that time in your life, you don't have all the information. The choices you make might be detrimental to your development also. So it's important that we do stuff like this and we try to put out the information for all our guys. And Jamie's been through the NCAA. I've sent countless goalies to the NCAA plus major junior, and I've seen the path. I'm a guy that likes to push NCAA because I like the development curve being later. And exactly, I think we're on the same page where if a guy's playing hockey at 22 and 23 years old and still enjoying the game, then I think we've all done our jobs. So that's kind of the goal from when I get them at 12, 13 years old is 10 years from today, I still want you playing hockey and still enjoying the game and loving going to the rink.
See, and that goes back to the original question, Jamie asked, and I know we talked about it right off the hop with, how long have I been in it and when do you suggest? You're talking about 10 years later having that client still playing hockey. And I mean, Jamie's been around a lot of guys, in the locker room, forwards, defensemen that, would have been drafted or not drafted. Those 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds, it goes back to the agency question. If you're not making the NHL by 18, 19, 20, 21, most of those agents are no longer with those players. I mean, the big agencies, right? I mean, and I'm not afraid to say that. I mean, I'll tell people that. I've had draft picks calling me when they're 20, 21, 22. And we're talking over a point a game in the East Coast. And we're talking 100 games played in the American Hockey League, that they're still looking for help because they used to have so-and-so, but obviously, he didn't peg out. He didn't stay in the show. But that was that decision at 15 or 14 that they made, trusting the person, right? And things change. If you're in a big agency, you have like you said, a totem pole. You have almost like a stable of players. And if your commitment is about having 175 NHL players and priding yourself on 42 first-round draft picks, I guess that's the business model they want. And really, like you said, to stay with a client for 10 years, if they're not in the NHL and they're not in the American Hockey League, you're not saying that, this is how big and powerful we are. This is how many first round draft picks we have. This is why you should have us, because that's not everybody. And to be honest with you, it's not even 60% of the players or 70. So the sad part is, though, 80% of those players will go that direction, right? So we've been upfront and honest right about that from the beginning. As I want to be the person that never throws a towel on our players. It's the player that does it. Like, I mean, the player said, you know what, I'm happy with what I've done, and I think I'm going to move on from the game. And as long as we're still there, and it's been an 8 to 10 year relationship, I feel confident that, and I feel happy because, yep, I didn't make $500,000 or $400,000 off a player because he never made the NHL, might have been drafted, but it wasn't about that. It was about the fact that the guy at the end of the day still called me, thanked me for everything I did over 10 years, and still calls me, right? I've had some crazy stories where I had one call me and say, I'm thinking about doing this WWE wrestling camp to get in. What do you think? Can you help me? And I'm like, well, yeah, our law office can help you with that. I mean, whatever contract comes up. But I mean, that's what I like. I have players now that are having kids, and they were kids when I met them. And it's good to still share those memories, not because they're still playing in the NHL and making money. It's because of the bond and the connection and the promise that I would stay with them all those years, right?
Yeah, and if I could speak to that for a quick moment is, it's not an accident that we've had you on this podcast. 3 of my current clients are actually represented by Gladiator Hockey and one of your advisors. And the feedback I get from them in dealing with you guys is grade A. I think the kind of the best compliment you guys could get was one of my goalies called me and I said, when was the last time you talked to Barry, your advisor? And because you hear the stories, I haven't talked to my agent in 7 months.
Yeah.
And the feedback I got was, well, he calls me after every single game. Every single one of my starts, he calls me and we talk about the game. I'm like, your agent calls you to talk about your game after the game. And it was, every single start. And this is a kid who's playing junior A that will be moving into college hockey in the next couple of years. And this is not a guy playing in the OHL that might be a first-round NHL pick. This is a guy who's still got a long road to go playing, going to go through college hockey, which is another 4 years. And the feedback was, he calls me after every single game. So it's the respect that I have for Gladiator hockey is kind of over and above from, because I've done this for a long time. I've had a lot of goalies have agents, and you hear those horror stories. I was talking to one of our OHL guys yesterday, and he said, I haven't talked to my agent. He's a 4-year OHL vet. I haven't talked to my agent since the day I got drafted. And that was 5 years ago. So kudos to you guys. You guys keep that mentality up, and you guys are going to keep getting quality families because you guys are putting in quality work.
Yeah, I mean, and it also has to do with who you have working for you, right? Another prime example was a goalie that was with the OHL team, didn't have a contract. I mean, again, played already with them, and they reached out to us. And one of my newer advisors, we tried to have him for years working with us. He was a former junior A coach, coached Brent Burns. He coached it's a whole whack of NHLers, and he's a police officer. And he finally retired. He was a staff sergeant. Finally, his obligations are done with the OPP, and working for us in his first year, and he picked this kid up, and we've been kind of guiding him with this OHL team, like try to get things tidied up there with the mess. But again, they didn't hear from the agent, right? Because kid was 18 years old at the time. Well, that means he's pretty much shot at the NHL, right? So let's not continue talking or communicating it. Especially, let's go back too, because the NCAA question of it again. Basketball changes rules with the agents and NCAA. Hockey really hasn't ironed anything out yet, so it's still the same, right? Technically, the rules are you need to pay for a service if you're having advice or a family advisor. That's what they recommend. That's what's in the NCAA regulations. So a lot of these agencies at 15 or 14 are just working on a handshake. They're not even working on a contract period, not even a no fee contract where let's put our name on paper saying, I am going to work for you, right? The problem I have with that is when you have nothing on paper. I mean, we know today that a handshake agreement, you can't trust it. And, so with us, we have stuff on paper. That way we feel obligated and we have to reach out to him. We can't just not talk to our guy for 4 years, even if he's been drafted in the O and not playing. But again, it also goes back to, like I said, you're hiring of people that are around the game and who you pick. The advisor you're talking about directly has been in the company longer than I've owned it or been a partner of it. Another retired police officer. Actually, I think all my advisors are retired police officers. There's this advisor's son was drafted in the OHL, played with, Matt Molson. He had about 10 NHLers on his Marlies team. But his son ended up being drafted, went to Cornell. So he's got a lot of experience, and we're talking 20 plus years with dealing with schools. I'm going to be sad to lose that advisor when I ever do. Unfortunately, his wife is battling terminal cancer. And, you were talking about this client of yours that hears from my advisor after every game. The last 3 years, his wife has been battling terminal cancer and still has the time to go out of his way. And I'm going to be honest, he doesn't just look after 2 or 3 players. He looks after a handful of players that are, I'm going to say the last 18 months, he's had at least 20 players commit to Division I programs. We're not a massive agency, but 20 players to go to Division I programs is a good chunk over an 18-month period. And it has to do with how this guy is able to handle the players working for me, how he's able to keep in touch with them, how he's able to offer development advice, how he's able to work those players. It's not always the right thing. I mean, sometimes we think it's the right path for a player to go to this program or what have you, and then it turns out it didn't work. I mean, the odds are normally it does. But then his connections with colleges, and then the years of sending quality players to these coaches is what allows you to have, 20, 25 kids over an 18-month period getting these D1 commits. Now we're starting to average, my guess is, like I said, we don't represent a ton of players, but I'm going to say the number's probably anywhere from 4 to 10 players a year between Division III and Division I. So because you're running in cycles, right? You're running in date of birth years, right? So every year you've got so many kids that are eligible or getting commits, and he's done really well. We've had commitments from full ride scholarships, which are rare, right? They're rare. But a lot of them are pretty good scholarships. We're talking 60, 70, 75%. And again, not every kid is that blue chip prospect, right? So the phone call every game, I had one that was local from Tilsonburg area that called me in his last year of junior eligibility and wanted to get an NCAA scholarship. Didn't have the grades. Didn't qualify with the grades. So the plan really quick in 12 months was get him to the BCHL, get him playing there, get him in college where there was no hockey program at that college because that's the rules, and get his grades up to a certain percentage. And the kid ended up coming away with a really nice package, Alabama Huntsville. So a decent program, right? So meaning decent for the education and nice weather. And you know, if you're going to play hockey, it's a decent place to play, right? So it's not Arizona State, but it's a decent place to play. But those are the commitments where that case I was thrown under the gun. But between myself and calling the advisor you were talking about, Derek, within months, it was all put together because as soon as we made the call and said, do you know this kid? Yeah, we do know that kid. Yeah, we were talking to, and within a period of 6 months, he was on his way and committed. So.
Can you explain the rules between the agents and the NCAA? You touched it briefly, but are there things you can and can't do when it comes to a family advisor, agent, you know, money, paper, that can make you ineligible for the NCAA?
So currently, like I said, there's a shift going on with this 4 major sports. Like basketball now, they're allowed to have an agent. It confuses me of what they're planning on doing out of the NCAA. But for the current time being, as soon as a player enters into a written or oral agreement, or an oral or a written agreement with an agent to represent or market them, now we say market as pick up the phone and call a pro team and speak on their behalf, they're ineligible. I mean, now, do we have houses tapped with wired and no, but you know what? People talk. And when I mean people talk, this goes back to the minor midget year. You know, that agent handing a bundle of 12 sticks and a pair of skates to a 14-year-old player, because it happens. I'm sorry, but it happens. You have people that see it, witness it, or what have you, or somehow get their hands on documentation. It gets to the NCAA, you're toast. You cannot receive gifts from an agent, so sticks, skates, equipment. You cannot receive, you know, mom and dad are having a hard time financially affording things. You cannot receive any money. You cannot have a house mortgage paid off. You cannot have car payments made. You cannot receive any gifts. I mean, technically, you're going to get a jacket, a hat, and whatever from the agency. No, I mean, you have to look at it as they view it as a form of bribing, kind of bribing, right? Like you're giving them something in exchange, and you're wanting a commitment in service. And the same goes for a player that's currently in the NCAA. Like you are not allowed, like players playing, you can't pick up the phone and start calling NHL camps or NHL teams for a camp, rookie camp, or any of that stuff for a player that's playing in the NCAA. Now the college coach can speak to those teams on behalf of the player for that, right? So you have to be very, very careful on how you do things. The biggest thing is always like this agency, it's a handshake agreement. There's no fee. They're offering to pay my son's summer training. You know, I mean, I get it, because the multi-million or sometimes $1 billion coming in, some of these agencies have built their own training centers, their own rinks, their own, you know, and they fly them all in. And then Derek, you know, you're kind of like me, right? Where next thing you know, you've worked with a kid for years. You develop the bond, you develop the relationship. And I always tell people when they talk about training, what should I do? What do you advise? You know what? I've been with you for 2 years and I've seen nothing but acceleration in your development. I don't care what outside person is telling you, whether it's from a major junior team or whatever, to come use this guy. I mean, if your development is going like this, and it's because you're working with this goaltending setup or this physical gym trainer, I wouldn't recommend a change. I don't care if you think the outside influence is going to get you to the NHL. I wouldn't do it, because you're trusting the network that you're with, right? So like I said, I know you would be unhappy if next thing you know your goalie's like, yeah, my agent's got this facility up there and they're flying me up there, and they got the guy that's working with, you know, Carey Price and this guy. Well, of course they got the guy working with Carey Price, because they got 5 NHL goaltenders. He's working with all of them because they paid for this guy to come in, who they're paying money to train their goalies, and it's part of their service that they're offering. Well, if you're 16 years old and you're being flown up there before you sign an OHL contract and you're still NCAA eligible and you've taken that flight for free and you're taking the free training, you're done. I mean, it's just a matter of having the proof. And sometimes agencies are uncareful themselves. We had an agent a few years ago, not with our agency, it was another prominent agent, had their kid from, I won't say what D1 program, but tweeting, client, tweeting, all the big goals. Next thing you know, NHL draft, client so-and-so, boom, 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 boom. So the guy had 2 first-round picks, and this guy was a first-round or second-round pick as well. Well, here they are tweeting all season long the play-by-play and tagging the word or putting the word client next to it. And then they're sitting here at the table at the draft at a fancy restaurant with client, boom, boom, boom. And then client drafted in, don't forget, the kid gets drafted in the NHL from D1. He's still NCAA eligible, right? So he's playing for that program and he's drafted. That's fine. That's okay. But the minute you start tweeting that he's a client of yours and he's with your agency and I'm probably paying for this fancy meal, well, right away, they know that, well, you know, he's not here advising the kid. He's here whining and dining and looking after him to make money off a potential pro contract. So it goes back to what Jamie's asking. You really have to be careful from day one to the minute you put ink to pen on a pro contract. You need to be careful, like regardless of what you say, what you do, and what you're receiving from people, not just agents, people. I mean, you got a company that wants you to market or take their gear or clothing, same thing, right? I mean, a sports store, LeBron James, I mean, I'm sure we all heard, I think when he was in high school, he took a shirt from a sports company or store in his hometown, and right away they were already investigating whether he was eligible, and he basically said, I'm going pro, see you later, right? So yeah, you have to be careful at a young age.
So a player and their family can pay an advisor for services, and still remain eligible, but cannot receive anything from that agent or their group because that is what will take away their eligibility. Is that correct?
Yes. So what they're saying is the way you look at it, and this is why I break it up in our agency. I have a guy that specifically is NCAA and deals with it. Now he's even come to me with the frustration about how the OHL draft works, where he's had some players who he thinks could be college players still get passed up in the OHL draft and gets pretty upset about it when they should have been drafted. But like you said, those kids at a young age, if you put them on an advisor agreement, if you go and you look deep enough in the regulations, it says that you cannot have a verbal or a written agreement with an agent. You can, if you're using an advisor service, it is recommended that a fee is paid for those services, for the direction of educational assistance, guidance, and development. So the way they're looking at it is, so if a family is paying for the service, they're getting advice. So how they're looking at it is they're treating it as, it's not somebody coming in and giving them free service, because that would be a gift, because you're willing to work for them for nothing. Well, why are you doing that? Why are you willing to invest all that time and energy for nothing for this player if the player has no potential to make money for you down the road? That's how they eliminate it. That you're basically saying that you're receiving a form of a payment from them, and then you know, as long as, hey, the last 5 years we've had NCAA requests family advisor agreements for at least a dozen of our players. They wanted to see an agreement, how it was worded. They wanted to see if there was a fee associated with some form of services for guidance. And how it was worded was not with our Gladiator and our advisor's name and the player, it was with the parents of the player. Because we are giving advice to the family, not the player, right? We are giving the parents the advice as well as the player too, but mainly dealing with the parents, right? What Derek talked about earlier is part of the job of communicating with the player, giving them the daily assistance, but we're working with the family. It's a family advisor, right? So they would look at it and see that it was between the family, and then, they paid sometimes it's, I want to see proof of the payment. And you know what? All 12 of them checked out. Not a problem. Not an issue with the NCAA. So as soon as we say we don't have one and we don't have proof, then we're in trouble, right? Like, we're in trouble. And then you'll have that battle out there of we heard that we do have an advisor fee for those players to keep their eligibility, right? Like, now I've been told time and time again that we're too cheap, that we don't charge enough. I think any amount of money when you're trying to help people is too much, in my opinion. I mean, that's just how I am. But the problem is, I don't want to be paying in a lawsuit for someone's eligibility being toast for a potential $250,000 scholarship. Now, that being said, we don't charge people up front. Meaning, some stories we're hearing is, the big agencies will want 4,000 or 5,000, 6,000 US up front, and then we're good, right? Well, what if the player doesn't play in a year or two, has an injury? Are you getting the money back? Two, if they decide to walk away from the game, are you getting the money? Like, are you getting the money back that you forked out front? Well, there's nothing really in that agreement. Well, that's not how we work. Like I said, we work up front, meaning an annual basis. So, like, if a player feels like they're not developing or don't want to continue, or the parents aren't happy, they can walk away from us at any time, right? And they're not out a ton of money. And you have to think of it this way. In the end, you're either going to still be with that agent if you're going to the NHL route. But I think Derek, or you spoke about hearing a guy that hadn't heard from his agent in 4 years. Well, all of a sudden now they're reaching out for somebody. Unfortunately, if we spend all those man hours doing no fee at all for those type of players to look after them, we couldn't run, right? So the reason we have that fee in place is to protect their eligibility, and it's actually a pretty small fee. If you talk to a lot of people out there, I'm sure the training, and I'm sure even their equipment and sticks is 10 times what we charge in a year. So that is how we even eliminated any issue with the NCAA, as I've heard too many horror stories in the past of questionable suspensions in the NCAA due to players receiving free advice or gifts, right?
Because that's good to
People
answer,
need to
because I
remember-
thought it was money any direction. So I didn't know that. So, like, when we have guys come through, and especially I'm not involved in a whole lot of the parent stuff, and I hear that, oh, so and so paid their agent $5,000. I was like, in my head, I was like, I don't think you're allowed to do that. But it's good to know, and for the people listening, that it's a one-way street when it comes to your family advisor in the NCAA.
Yeah. Like, so think of it this way: if you're the person at the clearinghouse for the eligibility, and you're hearing a story that, well, again, those are stories I've heard of $5,000 up front, and we're not even close to that. But they say we paid for this service, so they look at it as, okay, he's getting advice and they paid for it, right? So the family's out money, right? Not, so the family's paying to have someone advise them to get them to the NCAA, right? And so the NCAA is not going to knock that the family has made a financial investment to receive proper advice and guidance, versus when, and I've heard it, where there's questions in you have to get your amateur certificate, right, before you can be eligible. And I think you would have filled this out when you did it, and you would have had questions on it, and it said, is somebody marketing on your behalf or whatever, and what they're looking for is a yes. And then as soon as you check that yes, okay, are they doing this for free? Or, well, yeah, I've got blank and blank from this agency has been working with me for free for 4 years. Red lights, right? And then they want to investigate it more. So anytime the agent is doing something for nothing, they're up to something in their eyes. Or anytime the agent is paying you money, they're up to something. The stories about I won't name the agent, you can look it up and you'll know it. But how he started his career in football was he stood outside of UCLA and took loans out, was paying them $10,000 to get their commitment just before the NFL draft. But guess what? He took out $100,000 in loans. He got 3 or 4 players that were first-round draft picks. The NFL works different, where nowadays I think it's a $40 million guarantee, first rounder, boom, 40 mil. So percentage charged back, they're going to get that money back. But this guy that's how he was getting them. So the minute you got that proof of a agency handing him money, hey, I can help you, just come with me. I mean, especially if you think that, if you know that player's going to make you millions in contracts once they hit the free agent market, plus their endorsements and all the signing bonuses, you're $5-10 grand when they're 15 is peanuts, right? It's a drop in a bucket. So, but that's the first time actually I've heard that, Jamie, where someone had asked about or has said that they heard it was both ways. But yeah, no, it's only the one direction, where if you're doing it for free or you're paying them, there's going to be trouble. There really is. I mean, again, they have to find out. Like they're going to investigate it. They've already, like I said, at least a dozen of ours had requests for the paperwork trail to show that we did things up to the clearinghouse standards.
You want to promote your podcast?
No, you know what? I'm good. The promoting. I just wanted to come on and chat with you guys. You guys wanted to chat with me, and I thought it was kind of unique. It's funny how we got goalies here, and I mean today my guest on my podcast today is Eddie Lack, former NHL goalie, and again undrafted, right? So he went through a lot of highs and lows, and it was kind of unique how it must be goalie Monday for me. But yeah, no, anytime you guys ever need to chat, I mean, my guys are pretty good. Just one last thing, maybe, with our agency, one of my advisors, you know, that's another thing we offer, and I can't stress this enough, is mental awareness. Whether we struggle from mental illness or mental struggles with the game of hockey or life. One of our guys is, you know, he has gone through a lot of the schooling and the courses, and is a mental strength coach that we have. And, you know, if you guys ever want to talk about stuff like that outside, especially goalies, I mean, goalies, you know, they're tough. They're tough ones for us to take as clients, because it's very hard position, very limited spots. And, you know, I had one guy tell a goalie that they're coming up to watch him play, and I think let 5 goals in his first 6 shots, because he knew he was coming up to watch him. And, you know, those are the struggles, right? So if you guys ever need or want to chat, or you have a topic coming up and you want to reach out to any of my guys, I know Jerry or Jerry can be very knowledgeable for the NCAA for you guys for moving forward with teams and schools and updates. And Warren, my other advisor, he's like I said, the mental strength coach, deals a lot with athletes outside of hockey too. Because, you know, personally, myself and my family, I've had some mental health struggles with my own child, and Warren has some personal stuff with him. And I think we have to make sure that at the end of the day, whether we're, you know, Jamie, if you're working with young guys, Derek, any of you guys, they're young men, right? And they have a lot of challenges. So we got to make sure that we're there for their best interest, and we're there for their you know, their mental well-being to help them as well to grow as young men, and to have a positive effect to other people down the road.
Yeah, and I think anybody listening to this can genuinely feel how much you care about your athletes, putting all that stuff into place for them. So where can people find you if anybody's looking to reach out and connect?
Yeah, they can, we have a law office in Woodstock, Ontario. It's actually my partner's office. You can either reach out to the Bowen Law Office, or you can just find us on the internet at Gladiator Hockey Agency, www.gladiatorhockeyagency.com. You can just fill out a form on the website. Like I said, don't feel like as soon as you're filling in a form that you're committing to anything or you're being pressured. You know, we usually are pretty quick to follow up, and if it's just even advice, like, I mean, if somebody is with somebody or they're not with somebody, and they're not sure if they're getting the right advice, or they're not sure if they need advice from, you know, their son, whether they're 18 or 14, just reach out, and usually we're pretty quick to get back, and no pressure as well.